Behind the high walls of medieval convents, all are not as pure as it seems. Nuns bound by vows of chastity and obedience did not live holy lives. They broke their vows in shocking ways. A love affair with the priest, secret pregnancies, stolen fortunes, and even murder.
And became friendly with a lay brother or canon of the house at Waton. And the net result was that she became pregnant. And when the other nuns found out, they were horrified.
Join us as we step into the world where saints sometimes sin, and the holiest sisters harbored the darkest secrets. Here are forbidden things medieval nuns did. Bernadette Carini. In the past, young girls were often sent to convents to become nuns for many reasons. Some families believed this was the best way for their daughters to live a safe, holy life. Others couldn't afford the dowry needed for marriage, so joining a convent was a good alternative. Wealthy families used convents to prevent daughters from competing over family inheritance. For many girls, becoming a nun wasn't a choice, but a decision made by their parents. Although not much is known about Bernadette Carini's early life before the convent, it is believed that her father brought her to the convent when she was 9 years old, as a way to fulfill the promise he made to God during her birth. Like Hannah in the Holy Scriptures, he promised God his child if his wife and child made it out alive during her mother's difficulties during childbirth. That was how Sister Carini joined the convent. As she grew older, she became an embodiment of controversy and delusion. Yes, this 17th century nun lived a complex life mixed with spiritual experiences, power struggles, and scandals. Born in 1590 in Italy, Carini entered a convent at a young age. As years passed in the convent, she started claiming to have divine visions, including encounters with Jesus and angels. These mystical experiences earned her initial respect, and she eventually rose to become the abbess of her convent. But there is a clause: her claims became increasingly elaborate. She started declaring herself as the bride of Christ in a symbolic marriage ceremony and began imposing strict rules, such as banning meat and promoting self-flagellation among the nuns. This was getting out of hand, and everyone in the convent started getting worked up, and suspicions arose. Some nuns accused her of faking miracles like stigmata by pricking herself with needles. That's a very serious allegation, but that's not even the icing on the cake. Carini's most serious scandal involved her relationship with another nun, named Sister Bartolomea. According to those close to her, Carini was allegedly possessed by a male angel named Splenditello, who engaged in intimate acts with Bartolomea. This act blurred the line between spiritual possession and physical desire. Her actions brought shame to the church, and though the church lacked legal frameworks to handle such situations, this affair contributed to her downfall. After multiple investigations, the church stripped Carini of her position as abbess and imprisoned her in solitary confinement for the remainder of her life. She lived in isolation for 35 years until her death on August 7, 1661. But Bernadette Carini wasn't the only one who indulged in such activities at the convent. Her deeds didn't come close to Catherine Wells. Secret lovers, stolen church money, and broken rules. Catherine Wells lived a life of hidden sins. She was the prioress of Littlemore Priory in Oxfordshire and one of the most infamous figures in medieval convent history. Wells, a leader from the late 15th to early 16th century, became a symbol of moral decay within the church. Wells was ruthless. The scandal surrounding her reached its peak when it was revealed that she had a long-term relationship with Richard Hughes, a priest from the nearby area. How did their secret come to light? Everything hidden under the sun would always be brought to the light, and their affair came to light when Wells got pregnant and gave birth to a daughter. This is an act that violated her vows of chastity. Their relationship not only embarrassed the convent, but also symbolized how some religious figures exploited their positions to engage in secret relationships. Church records from investigations show that it was Wells who was deeply attached to Hughes, not the other way around. Their relationship proved to be a concrete wall. In fact, before and after their daughter's death in 1513, she would send him gifts and silver from the priory's collection, including valuable silver goblets. Wells was stealing from God's pocket shamelessly. While she channeled funds toward Hughes, the nuns under her care lived in poor conditions, complaining about insufficient food, clothing, and the decay of the priory's infrastructure. Several nuns protested about this mistreatment, but their voices were ignored or punished by Wells. The nuns described Wells as an absentee leader, roaming the countryside with little regard for her responsibilities. When internal disputes arose, she used harsh punishments to maintain control. In 1517, a formal investigation was launched by the Bishop of Lincoln, following a string of complaints about Wells's conduct. Wells was summoned to the bishop's court in Lincoln to face charges of corruption and incontinence. This revealed the full extent of her misconduct, ranging from financial corruption to her improper relationship with Hughes. Although Wells initially denied the allegations, she eventually confessed under the weight of evidence presented against her. The bishop ordered her removal as prioress, but allowed her to continue performing basic duties until a replacement could be appointed. As for her relationship with Hughes, we do not know if they were separated or continued their relationship. That information died with history. Catherine Wells didn't parade herself as a saint and demanded to be worshipped like Maria Agnese Firao. History remembers her as the master of deceit, who weaved a web of lies and tricks in the 1880s that still captures our interest till this day. Maria lived in a convent called Sant'Ambrogio in Rome. While in the convent, she told everyone that she had special powers from God. Firao claimed she could feel the wounds of Jesus. These wounds are called stigmata, and they appeared on her body exactly as they were in Jesus' body. Many nuns believed she was holy and started treating her like a saint, even though she was still alive. You know, saints are dead, righteous people, right? Over time, the church found out that her stigmata were fake and immediately declared her a fraud. She was sent away, but some nuns at the convent kept worshipping her in secret, refusing to believe the church's decision. They called her Blessed Maria and followed her teachings, even though this was against the rules. Despite her eventual trial and condemnation by the Catholic Inquisition, her legacy of deceit and manipulation continued to shape the convent's practices even after her death. Her followers insisted that the church's judgment against her was wrong. The convent became a center of scandal, involving not only spiritual manipulation, but also serious criminal activities, including poisoning attempts and theft. Firao's cult-like influence extended into various disturbing practices, such as forcing sexual relationships between nuns and creating initiation rites. This behavior fostered an atmosphere of unchecked power, just like her protégée, Maria Luisa. Behind her innocent smile, this young woman was caught up in a web of fraud and embezzlement, all under the shadow of Firao's influence. In the mid-1800s, the Sant'Ambrogio convent in Rome became involved in a scandal that shocked the Catholic Church. Maria Luisa, a powerful nun, played a central role in the scandal. As the novice mistress, she was responsible for guiding new nuns. However, instead of teaching them properly, she misused her authority. She claimed she was receiving special messages from God and convinced the other nuns to secretly worship Maria Agnese Firao, a nun who had been exiled earlier for pretending to be a saint. Maria Luisa used fear and manipulation to control the younger nuns. She made them believe that obeying her would lead to God's blessings. She also pressured some of the nuns into secret sexual relationships, violating the rules they had promised to follow as part of their faith. Maria Luisa manipulated another nun, Maria Francisca, to write a holy letter from the Virgin Mary because she had good handwriting. She planned to put the confessor to have an affair with her through the fake letters from the Virgin Mary. Which Christian who studies the scripture would fall for such? Well, her plan worked. The confessor jumped into bed with her, and soon other nuns joined too. Remember, we said she pressured some nuns into committing such acts with her. Using this letter style was her way to get what she wanted from them, without any form of pressure. When asked about her late-night get-together with the confessor, she'd say they were only talking to God and nobody should worry. One of the nuns said that Maria Luisa would wrap herself around her and suggest that she lie with her legs raised. She'd move her hands and make a noise she couldn't identify and tell her she was exchanging fluid with her to cure all illnesses. Her control went beyond spiritual manipulation, and these ungodly acts, Maria Luisa would poison those who stood in her way, including a German princess, Katharina von Hohenzollern. Princess Katharina joined the convent seeking a religious life, but she quickly noticed that strange and dangerous things were happening. Afraid for her life, she wrote secret letters to her cousin, asking him to help her escape the convent. In these letters, she described the abuse, poison attempts, and false worship that Maria Luisa encouraged. With her cousin's help, Caterina managed to leave the convent and report what she had witnessed to the church authorities. The Vatican launched an investigation that revealed the extent of Maria Luisa's wrongdoings. The inquiry exposed how she had deceived the nuns, made them engage in inappropriate relationships, and used poison to silence anyone who resisted her. The investigation also confirmed that the nuns were still worshipping Maria Agnese Ferrao, even though the church had declared Ferrao a fraud years earlier. This scandal revealed the dangers that could arise when people in religious institutions misuse their power. The investigation ended with Maria Luisa's removal from the convent, and the church worked to regain control over the nuns. Some nuns sought power and control within the convent, while others chose to escape instead. A good example is Joan of Leeds. The story of Sister Joan of Leeds is one of the most unusual and rebellious episodes from medieval England. Joan was a nun living at St. Clement's nunnery in the 14th century. She wasn't happy in the convent and felt trapped by the rules of convent life, so she decided to escape. And her method was unlike anything the church had seen before. Rather than simply running away, Joan faked her death, hoping to trick her fellow nuns into believing she had passed away. She went as far as to construct a dummy that resembled her body, probably did this by filling it with sand or dirt to make it seem convincing. The nuns at St. Clement's were deceived and buried the dummy in the convent cemetery, thinking it was Joan's corpse. This gave Joan the perfect opportunity to slip away unnoticed and start a new life. And she succeeded. She made her way to Beverley, a town about 30 miles from York, where the nunnery is located. She hoped to live freely beyond the strict rules of the convent. However, Joan's freedom didn't last long. News of her disappearance reached the church, and Archbishop William Melton soon learned of her deception. Outraged, Melton sent a letter to the religious authorities describing Joan's actions as a grave scandal. He accused her of turning away from her vows of religious obedience and being tempted by carnal lust, implying that she abandoned the convent to pursue romantic or sinful desires. He ordered that Joan be found and brought back to the nunnery to face punishment for her behavior. What makes Joan's story so fascinating is the boldness and creativity of her escape. In an era where nuns were expected to follow strict rules of obedience, her act was both scandalous and dangerous. Religious vows are seen as sacred, and abandoning them was considered a serious offense. For a nun to fake her death and escape not only embarrassed the convent, but also threatened the church's control over its members. Despite the Archbishop's orders, there is no clear record of whether Joan was ever recaptured or what happened to her afterward. Her story ends with a mystery, leaving historians to wonder whether she managed to live freely in Beverley or if she was forced back into the convent. But before we go on with the rest of the video, let's look at this image sent to us by a subscriber. This image shows two people inside what looks like a church or an old chapel. The person in front is a young woman dressed like a nun. Her expression seems angry or full of emotion, as if she's letting out everything she feels. Behind her, a man is wearing brown clothes, probably a priest or monk. The room around them feels serious and quiet, with dim lighting and stone walls. There are candles in the background, adding to the old, holy atmosphere. The picture tells a story about emotions boiling in a place that's supposed to be peaceful. These two are breaking rules and expressing feelings that are not welcome in such a sacred place. It is obvious they are both trapped by strict religious rules, but something causes them to finally rebel. Maybe the nun got tired of following rules she didn't believe in, or maybe both characters are involved in a conflict. This picture is powerful because it shows how even people in peaceful places can have moments where they want to rebel. Tell us in the comments section what you think about this image. Now let's get back to more forbidden deeds done by nuns. The Nun of Monza. Also known as Sister Virginia Maria, she became infamous for getting pregnant twice and unaliving a nun to keep her secret safe. Sister Virginia lived in Italy during the 17th century and was part of a convent in Monza, a town near Milan. She was not just a regular nun, she came from a wealthy family and was very powerful in her community. As a nun, she was supposed to follow the rules of being a nun, which involves chastity. But she began a secret relationship with a man named Count Giovanni Paolo Ossio. They fell in love, and their meetings were very sneaky. They exchanged letters by lowering them from the convent window using a rope, and some of the other nuns even helped them with their secret. As time went on, Sister Virginia became pregnant twice. The first time, she had a stillborn baby. The second time, she had a girl named Alma Francesca, and the Count accepted her as his daughter. But the walls had ears, so the secret love affair could not stay hidden forever. A nun in the convent threatened to tell everyone about what was happening. To keep the secret, Count Ossio killed the nun who was going to speak out and expose their secrets. Sister Virginia and some other nuns helped him cover up the murder. This terrible act caused rumors to spread, and soon the local authorities were informed. When the Archbishop of Milan found out, he ordered an investigation. Sister Virginia claimed that evil forces had influenced her actions. In the end, she was found guilty and sentenced to be walled up in the convent for 13 years. After serving her sentence, she lived in the convent until she died at 1650. How evil deeds pales in comparison to the story of Sister Mary Elizabeth. Behind a caring facade, she got caught in a shocking scandal that revealed her dark role in the abuse of orphans. Sister Mary Elizabeth was associated with the Sisters of Providence and worked at St. Joseph's Orphanage in Burlington, Vermont, where many children faced severe mistreatment. Children in this orphanage were said to suffer from physical and emotional abuse. They were often subjected to harsh punishments, neglect, and even sexual abuse from the nuns and priests in charge of taking care of them. Sister Mary Elizabeth was allegedly among those who participated in the act or turned a blind eye to these horrific acts. The exposure of these abuses gained attention when an investigation brought the story to light, which revealed issues in Catholic orphanages, not just in Vermont, but across the United States. During the investigation, it was clear that these practices had been overlooked for decades. You might think that these nuns and priests would be sent to prison, but no. Sister Mary Elizabeth and other nuns were not directly punished. This discovery just led to a greater awareness of the issues within religious institutions and prompted changes in laws concerning childhood abuse. Which is worse, a nun abusing children or a nun practicing witchcraft? Speaking of witchcraft, you might remember the story of Sister Joanna. In Portugal during the 17th century, a time when many people were afraid of witchcraft, there were lots of stories about witches who could use magic to hurt others or make them sick. This fear led to many women being accused of witchcraft, especially if they acted differently or if bad things happened in their community. In Joanna's convent, some nuns were accused of engaging in witchcraft and other strange practices. These accusations were serious because they could lead to investigations by church officials. The church wanted to protect its followers and believed that witchcraft was a dangerous threat. The Inquisition, a powerful church group, often investigated these claims. They were known for being very strict and could punish people harshly, even if they were innocent. When Sister Joanna and the other nuns faced accusations, it was likely because of misunderstandings or jealousy. People might have seen things they didn't understand, like herbal remedies or rituals, and thought they were witchcraft. The Inquisition would then look into these claims, and the nuns could face questioning and even torture to confess to the crimes. This was a very scary time for many women, as most of the people accused of witchcraft were women. Sister Joanna's story shows how fear can lead to wrongful accusations. Many women in similar situations found their lives changed forever because of rumors and suspicion. These witch hunts were often fueled by community fears, and those who were different were easy targets. It was a time when people did not understand much about health or medicine, so they turned to magical explanations for their problems. While there are not many details about Sister Joanna specifically, her story is part of a larger history of women who faced persecution during the witch hunts. Many nuns and women were punished for things that were not true, similar to the infamous the Waton Priory sandal. A shocking story from the 12th century in Yorkshire, England, hides dark secrets that could change everything we think we know. It involves a young nun who was forced to join the Gilbertine Priory against her will. This priory is a strict religious community. Her name was not recorded in history. Life in the convent was very harsh, and the nun struggled with the strict rules. Feeling trapped, she began a secret relationship with a lay brother, a man who worked for the priory but wasn't part of the clergy. When the relationship was discovered, the punishment was severe and brutal. The other monks captured the lay brother and castrated him as punishment for his crime. This violent act was a way of showing that any breach of religious vows, especially involving immortal intimacy, would not be tolerated. For the nun, her punishment was just as harsh. She was publicly humiliated and subjected to severe penance. This is a common way the Church tried to control or shame those who disobeyed religious rules. Nuns and monks were expected to dedicate their lives to God, which meant avoiding any romantic or sexual relationships. The Church saw these actions as sins that needed harsh correction to prevent others from doing the same. But then there are cases like Lincoln Priory. In the 15th century, records from Lincoln Priory exposed cases of immoral behavior within the convent. During this period, bishops conducted official visitations to inspect the monasteries and convents. These visits were to ensure monks and nuns were following their vows of celibacy, poverty, and obedience. Some of these inspections uncovered sexual misconduct and other inappropriate behavior among religious members. At Lincoln Priory, some nuns were accused of engaging in sexual relationships with men outside the convent, violating their vows of chastity. Relationships like these were considered not only sinful, but also scandalous, since they undermined the Church's authority and purity. Visitations also revealed that some monks were involved in similar behavior, showing that moral lapses were not isolated to women. These accusations became part of the broader narrative used to justify the dissolution of the monasteries under King Henry VIII in the 16th century. The Crown argued that religious houses had become centers of corruption rather than places of holiness, reinforcing the decision to close convents and monasteries across England. But just before they closed, one more secret had to be exposed, involving the Priory Arthington. This convent from the 16th century was among the many religious houses in England that fell into scandal and became part of the justification for the dissolution of the monasteries under King Henry VIII. During this period, there were increasing concerns about the moral conduct of nuns and monks, especially as England moved toward religious reform. At Arthington Priory, which was a small community of Cistercian nuns, accusations surfaced about nuns engaging in relationships with local men. The involvement of nuns in sexual misconduct directly violated their vows of chastity and obedience, which were considered sacred commitments to God. Such actions were not only seen as personal failings, but also as evidence that convents were no longer places of holiness and discipline. The reports of immoral behavior at Arthington, along with similar accusations from other religious houses, helped build the Crown's case that monastic institutions had become corrupt. This narrative justified Henry VIII's sweeping decision to close monasteries and convents across the country, a process known as the dissolution of the monasteries. The wealth from these religious houses was confiscated by the Crown, and many nuns, including those at Arthington, were forced to leave their cloistered lives and re-enter secular society, often with little support. The Priory of Arthington's downfall reflects how religious life, especially for women, was tightly controlled, but also how moral lapses were used as political tools during a time of significant religious change. Many accusations, though potentially true, were also amplified for political purposes, as the Crown sought to dismantle the Church's influence and seize its properties. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one.